what I'm going to do is sort of run through a couple of different ways of using various types of technology that I found useful. Not so very long ago, being the technophobe that I am. Poetry workshops consisted largely of sitting in a circle with lots of paper and talking about the poems, and whoever owned the particular poem scribbling furiously, trying to work out what it is everyone was saying about it. And largely, while it was all right, you found that the people were so busy writing, they weren't really taking in what was being said about the poem quite a bit of the time. They also didn't maybe get all the feedback that was being given from around the sort of peer group of people. And then I discovered interactive whiteboards. And I tend to use them quite a bit. They're very useful for several things. At level 1, I teach a lot about form and structure. I've used the level 1 course around that. And it's very difficult for students to get their head around what different meters actually are. You can hum it for them, you can beat it out on a drum, but unless they do it for themselves, they don't really get it. Now, what I tend to do is to pull up something like that, poem by Elizabeth Bishop. Now, what I would, you can do this 2 ways. I'm going to go through one way, and then I'm going to tell you about the other way. The first way is just to do it on Word. Now, if you have it on Word on an interactive whiteboard, you can use the little pen to sort of highlight various things on it. And you can, if you've got more than one interactive whiteboard in the room, which we tend to have, we have 4 in some of the teaching rooms, anyway, we have 4. You can have large groups of 20-odd people split into small groups, each of them doing this for themselves, which makes life a lot easier. And then you can be walking around the groups and going, well, do you see how this is working? Do you see what's happening? Are there any problems with this? So what they can be doing for themselves is things like that, trying to figure out where the stresses fall, for instance, or where the rhymes are, for instance. Okay? Now, they can be up having goes with that. They can go with their little pen and go, I think that one's stressed, that one's stressed, that one, and that one's stressed. And then someone else will come along and go, that's not how I hear it. I hear it like X, Y, and Z. And what they begin to sort of grasp through that is that stress is variable. People will hear different lines differently. And also, they'll grasp that not all meters, certainly in the better poems, are mechanical meters. They're breathable, they're flexible. There's no such thing in a really great poem as perfect iambic pentameter. Even Shakespeare didn't use it. So you can show them that, and they can find it out for themselves, which is even better. Because if they find it out for themselves, they remember it. At another level, what you can have them doing is something like this, where you can say, right, try and identify the different types of images that are in the poem. Use different colours to identify them. And if you've got sort of 4 pens, I've cheated a bit by colours, but if you've got 4 pens, you can go and do that. If you're on this, if you're using Word, then you can hit on the shading and you can pick any colour you want and just use the same pen. And it's very visually appealing. It's visually memorable. They'll remember the overall pattern of that image after I take that away. I guarantee you, if I do that, to say, right, where was all the red images? Where were they?
Top.
The top. You remember, it's there, it's in there. So you know exactly where the red image is, and you know that red stands for religious. So you can, or red stands for the filthy in this case. But you can see what I mean. Freudian slip. And the green is religious. So you can see how that poem splits itself across the volta. And then you can explain to them what voltas are. And they can see how they operate. So it's about just involving as many senses as possible, involving something which is visually memorable to help the student get what's going on and get it for themselves rather than you just telling them. They can figure this out for themselves. Anything you learn for yourself, you never forget. So that's the first thing you can do if you're just using words. And that's very, very useful, especially when you're talking about what you might call knowledge transfer. In other words, where you're trying to get them to learn rules. In a workshop situation, if we can imagine that this isn't a poem by Elizabeth Bishop for a second, what you can do is cut and paste this into the interactive whiteboard system. And once you've done that, then you can use the pen to overwrite on it. You can draw circles around certain words, underline them, score them out, put little notes saying, I think you should cut this, or this is the default adjective, or whatever it happens to be. And again, the student can save that. You can click save and hold on to it. And you can do it so that each person who critiques the poem can save a different little version of it. Now the student can take that with them on a memory stick, come back at their leisure after class time's finished, go through them, and really just concentrate on the feedback. And they don't have to be busy trying to take notes and trying to scribble down everyone's telling them about it at the time, which means they can concentrate more on what's being said and actually take it in. So it works two ways. And that's very useful for sort of workshop type approaches. Now I do other things as well with my students, as some of my third years will tell you. I tend to sort of edit the poems, usually in Word, and just start cutting back, just to show them what the process is of paring down a poem, because a lot of that, it's very painful for them to do that, especially in the early years. And I do it quite brutally. I pare back and pare back and pare back until the bare bones of the poem are all that's left. And I say, no, that's what you need to do with every version. Anything you can cut it. And they see it actually happening. And once they see it happening, it starts to click. Because you can tell them all you want to cut, and they will cut how much, and then you show them how. This is how much I've cut of it. And sometimes they're shock horror, but they get the picture. They get just how difficult it is to write a good poem. That's basically the sort of critical element, if you want. The other element, of course, that we need to include is an element of play. Because we want them creating new stuff. And we're going to give them exercises to help them create new stuff. And we can use technology to do that. I mean, one I particularly quite like is this one, where they play a version of tag with a mobile, well, with two mobile phones. One's no use. And this has several advantages. Basically, what I tend to do is start off with a source couple of lines. Those two are from poetry, and sometimes anything that's heavily image-based is really good for this. And you just throw that at them and you say, right, now, we're going to split you into pairs, and this is what's going to happen. Here's your source line. Now you're going to send a short poem, and it can't be any bigger than the screen of your mobile phone, and you're going to send it to your mate here. And your mate's going to reply to it within 24 hours. And then you're going to reply to his within 24 hours. And what happens is you involve them in this sort of cooperative venture over the course of 2-3 days, sometimes longer, depending. And this is just an example of the sort of stuff that can come out of it. Now the reason that's structured as it is because Andy had 4 lines to view on his mobile phone, and Ian had 6. And thereby they invented a whole new form of poem with alternating 4 and 6 line stanzas. And again, it's just a question of throwing a stone into somebody else's pond, really, and seeing what the ripples are. And again, it doesn't feel like work because it's something that we're doing anyway, we're texting each other. All you've done, really, is to dictate a slight sort of form of the text. What's this text going to be about? So you give them really a subject to text each other with. And a lot of people liked the exercise. Some didn't. Some felt very constrained by it. Some people felt fairly pressurized by it, in that they knew they had to respond within 24 hours. And what it said to me was, oh, if he sends a really good one, I'm going to feel really bad if I can't send one. It's just. But once they get over that initial sort of trepidation, once the ball starts bouncing, as it were, then they tended to like it. They actually liked the sense of only having this much space to work with as well. They felt that useful. I thought it might have felt constraining for them, but it didn't. They said they found it useful, knowing that they had to fill this much space. Now, all of this isn't just about sort of being green, although in one sense it does sort of salve our reputation in some quarters for the mountains of paper that we tend to use. But it does allow us to say, well, actually poetry does have a place within the modern environment. Judy and I shared a student as well at one point. And he came to me for an independent study after having done Judy's course, I think, in first year or second year. And he came to me with an independent study where he wanted to do poems which were based around PowerPoint, which he was going to put up on the internet. And he called it Poetry in Motion, I think it was. And what it was the poems came almost in a concrete form, so that you would have poem A, then poem B would materialize, and then poem C would fall between them and make a completely new poem. You had another one which ran like a ticker tape. You had another one which sort of bounced around and sort of different words lit up almost at different periods. And it took a lot of doing. I mean, not only just the writing of the poetry, but the actual software work was quite sort of, I would imagine it was quite sort of specialized stuff. I mean, I certainly couldn't. But he ended up giving me the assignment on a disk. And, I thought, great. It's keeping poetry right at the modern end as well. So it does have that advantage. I guess the other things that we can do or we can look at is the creative process. I mean, we have a module where students study various drafts of various writers. Time? 2 minutes. Creative process. And basically, if I'm sort of looking at the possibility of now getting wikis involved. And if you can create wikis for each version of a poem, they can act as a writer's journal. The writer can annotate on the wiki as to why they made the certain changes that they did between version to version. And that basically does their assignment for them, because they can study their own creative process over a period of 2 to 3 months using that. So again, there's all sorts of ideas that we can play with. And I think that's, I guess, the point that I wanted to make today, was if you play with the new technology, there's no end to what you can do with it. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. The other thing I'd like to say, just before I'm called off the stage, is that I have a project funded by the English Subject Centre on the theory of creative writing pedagogy. Why we teach the way we do. What do we actually teach? All of those questions. There is, I think, a little call for papers in the back of your pack, and I will be most happy to receive them. The first deadline is August 31st, and there will be rolling deadlines thereafter. Thank you very much.